into my combine animation, and here the first thing I would do is that I'm going to be importing the motion from the framer motion like so. Next we have to define our div, and I'm going to close there like so and define them as a motion div. I'm going to also provide a bit of styling to them. Let's just use our class name, and for this class name we are going to be setting the background to totally purple and 500. Width will be set to 20, height will also be set to 20. So underneath there, we also have to provide the animate prop, and on this animate we want to set the x-axis to 200 and the rotation to be 360 degree, and also for the scaling we are going to be setting that to 1.5. Underneath there we have to provide a transition, and for this transition we are going to be providing a duration of 2 seconds. So now if I save my file and check this out, so let me just refresh there, and here you can see it's going to give us that rotation right here, and that's looking super amazing. Next we have to create our sequential transformations. In this case we have to create an animation sequence, so use multiple elements like square or circle or something like that, then animate them in a sequence where one moves to the right, then the next one follows after the delay, using different transformation like move, rotate, or skewing and something like that. Okay, so yeah, once again that's going to be the final one, so give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay, then come back and watch the solution. And now I'm going to give you my solution. So I'm going to go ahead and create my, oh what the hell is I just do, let's just remove that and create my file right here with the name of sequential boxes.tsx file, and I'm going to be using my array.fce inside there. Go ahead and go to our app component, comment this line out, and then I'm going to be providing my sequential boxes and just run there. Let me go ahead and go to my component, and the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the motion from where? From the framer motion. Inside there you would need a few boxes, so we can define an array like so, but we don't have to do that. We're going to be defining our array by using these curly braces. So we're going to be using like dot dot dot, then we want to create like 5 elements inside this array, and then we want to iterate over through them by using the map method. So we are not interested in anything, but we want to get the index like so, and inside there what do we have to do? We have to define our motion.div, and I'm going to close there. So now inside this div I'm going to be providing the key, and key will be set to that index which we are now getting from this array right here. I'm going to also provide a bit of classes to it, so I'll just write bg will be set to teal of 500, width will be set to 20, height will also be set to 20, and margin for like all around will be set to 2. And I'm going to be also providing the animate prop, and on this animate we want to move that to the x-axis of 100 pixel. And for the transition we are going to be providing the duration, and for the duration we are going to be setting that to like 0.5 seconds. And I'm going to also provide a delay, so I'll just use like delay, and delay will be set to that index times 0.5 seconds, and that is it. Okay, so let me just check this out. So if I just refresh there, it's gonna first of all move this one, then this one, and then finally that one. You know what, let me just set that to 1 second. And now if I refresh there, first of all it's gonna move that one, then this one, and then the third one. But if you have like a lot more boxes, like, you know what, let me just increase the size of that to like 5 boxes or maybe 10 boxes. So this is how the animation will look like. So I'm gonna go back, and now let me just refresh them. So first, second, third, fourth, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that was the first exercise of this course. Welcome to the second practice module. So in this one, we're going to be creating amazing animations. So let's talk about the first one. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to create a simple fade in and fade out animation. So what do we have to do? We have to create a component with the name of fade in component, or just a fade component, then use the motion.div from the framer motion to create a div that fades in and fades out. You can style that by using the Tailwind CSS, or you can also style that by using just simple CSS if you wanted to. Then add a button that toggles the visibility of the fade component. So yeah, give it your best shot. If you can do it, you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my components folder. So I'll just define my components folder, and inside there we're going to be creating our fade component.tsx file. So I'll use my array.fce inside this, save my file, and register this component right here, just like that. I'm gonna save my file, and this is how it looks like right here. So next thing that we have to do is that we have to grab something called the motion from where? From the framer motion, like so. And inside there, let's just take care of the toggling and untoggling, or you can say the visibility or unvisibility. So I'll just create a state with the name of like visible, and then set visible, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and here we have to set there to false. Okay, so now inside this component, what do we have to do? We have to define our class names. So I'll use like flex, and flex will be set to column and items will be set to center. So now inside this div, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to define our button, and now I'm gonna say like toggle fade, and here we also have to provide a bit of styling to this. So I'll use like margin for the bottom will be set to 4, padding all around will be set to 2, background will be set to totally blue of 500, and text will be white totally rounded. I'm gonna save my file, and when somebody clicks on this button, we want to fire this function. Okay, so which will just set the visibility to not visibility or not visible, which means like if this is true, it's going to make it false. If this is false, it's going to make it true. And here you can see we are now getting our amazing button. If we click on there, nothing will happen. So yeah, let's just take care of the rest of the content. So I'm going to collapse there. And here we are going to be defining our div and our data. So now let me just go back. And what do we have to do? We have to first of all check if this is visible, and then based on their visibility, we are going to be showing this UI. But if this is not set to true and this is not visible, we are not going to be showing nothing at all. Okay, so let's just create our motion.div, and here what do we have to do? We have to do a lot of things. So I'll just provide a class name. Pairing all around will be set to 4. Background will be set to gray of 200 and totally rounded. So now underneath that we have to create our initial state, and for this initial state we're going to be starting our animation by providing the opacity of 0. Then we are going to be providing the animate prop. On this animate prop we are going to be setting the opacity to 1, and now we also have to provide the exit prop. So on this exit we want to set the opacity to 0 once again, and then finally we have to provide some sort of a transitions. So I'll just say like duration will be set to 0.5. I'm gonna save there, but this is not how we are going to be closing our div. I'm gonna close them manually, and I'm gonna just put some sort of a text right here. And I will say like, first of all, let me convert that to the motion.div, and then I will just say like, hello, I don't know, I am a fading component or something like that. And now let me test this out. So here you can see we are now getting there, but we have to change the text to totally black, like so, and now this is looking better. If I click on this toggle fade, it's gonna hide there. If I click on there once again, it's gonna unhide there. So what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna wrap that in this section, or you know what, we're not gonna be wrapping it in the section, but I'm gonna wrap that in the animate presence. I'm gonna import that and close that like so. So I'm gonna cut that from here, and I'm going to place that right here. So now if I click on this toggle button, so it's gonna unhide there. If I click on there once again, it's gonna hide there from the UI, and that's because of this animate presence. So if I just remove there for a second and watch what happens. So if I click on there, it's gonna unhide there, but now if I click on there once again, so it's gonna hide there totally instantly, like as you can see right here. But now if I provide this animate presence once again, save my file and click on there, so it's gonna hide there. And if I click on there, it's gonna slowly hide there. So yeah, that's just the basic animation, and that was our basic fade in component, or just a fade component to be precise. So now I'm gonna go ahead and perform the second practice challenge, or whatever you want to call it. Next, we have to create a sidebar that will slide in from the left when we click on the button. So what do we have to do? We have to create some sort of a component, and then we have to use the motion.div. Then we can style our sidebar by using the Tailwind CSS. We can use the Framer Motion Animate prop to slide the sidebar in the form of the left. Then we have to add a button that will toggle the visibility. So once again, if you can do that, go ahead and do that. But if you can't do that, then don't worry. I'm going to show you the solution right now. So I'm going to define my sidebar component, and here we have to use our RAFCE inside there, save my file, comment this line out, and provide my sidebar right here. Let's just go ahead and start working on this component. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab the motion from where? From the Framer Motion. Next we have to create our state. So I'm going to be using like is open, and then set is open. It's going to be equals to the use state, and here we have to specify the false value to there. Now I'm going to go to the UI and remove that from here. I'm going to also provide the class name of flex to them. Inside there we are going to be defining our button, and which will just say like toggle sidebar or something like that. Okay, I'm gonna also provide a bit of styling to this. So like margin for the bottom will be set to 4, pairing all around will be set to 2, background will be set to blue of 500. You can also set the text to totally white, totally rounded. So if I save my file, and this is how it looks like right here. So if I click on there, nothing will happen, but I can also attach my event handler on there. And so when somebody try to click on there, what do we have to do? We have to just use the set is open and set that to not is open. Okay, so which means like if this is true, make that false. If this is false, make that true. If I click on there, still nothing will happen because we have to provide our UI underneath this button. Next, we have to use our motion.dev and create our sidebar. So I'm going to be using like this motion.dev, and then I'm going to close there like so. Inside this dev, we are going to be defining our h2, which will have the class of text only large, and also the font will be set to bold. And it's going to say like a sidebar or something. Now underneath this h2, we can create a paragraph. Now we'll say like some random content that will goes here or something like that. Now let me provide a bit of classes and also a bit of styling to this component, or to this element to be precise. I'm going to be using the class name, and here we are going to be providing our classes totally dynamically. So I'll use like fixed class, and also left will be set to 0, top will be set to 0, and height will be set to totally full, background will be set to gray of 700. And I'm gonna also provide the text, and text will be set to totally white. Pairing all around will be set to 4. And here now we have to render our classes dynamically. So what we have to do is, this is open, then we have to set there to empty string. But if this is not open, then we have to set there to minus translate value, translate. On the x-axis is going to be set to full. Okay, so now let me just save my file, and now underneath that, let me just show you that. If I click on there, here you can see we're now getting our sidebar, and then some random content right here. You can specify the input field or the checkboxes or whatever you want to put right here. But yeah, we are now getting our sidebar, but we are not providing any animations to there. So to provide our animation, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to use our initial state, and for this initial state, we are going to be setting the x value to minus 100%. And now underneath there, we also have to provide the animate prop. And on this animate prop, you want to set the x value. If this is open, so in that situation, you want to set there to 0%. But if this is not open, so you want to set there to minus 100%. And we are going to be also providing a bit of transitions. So let's just provide a bit of transitions. And on this transition, we are going to be setting the duration to 0.5 seconds. And now if I click on this toggle button, it's going to unhide there, and it's going to give us this sidebar totally animated. If I click on there once again, it will make it disappear. So yeah, this is also amazing practice that we've just worked on. So you can totally animate, and you can also specify different styling for the button. You can also specify different styling for this sidebar if you wanted to. But yeah, that was our practice number 2. Now let's start working on the third one. What do we have to do? We have to create a model with a transition. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to create a component, then we have to use the motion.dev. You can style it by using the Tailwind CSS, or you can also use the just CSS if you want to. Then we have to use the frame and motion to animate the model entrance and also the exit. Okay, so we can just create a button which will trigger the model. So yeah, let's just start working on that. I'm gonna go ahead and create my model right here. So I'll just use like model.tsx and use my RAFCE inside there. Copy the name of that and register that model right here, just like that. I'm going to go ahead and go to my model component, and the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the motion from where? From the framer motion. Now inside this model, we are going to be creating our state like is open once again, and then set is open, and it's going to be set to the use state, and then we have to set there to false. Now I'm going to remove this model from here, and I'm going to provide a bit of classes to this. So I'll use like flex, and also flex will be set to column, and items will be set to totally center, and that's done. Next we have to define our button, and on this button it's going to say like open the model, and now we have to provide the class name. So I'll use like margin for the bottom will be set to 4, pairing all around will be set to 2, background will be set to blue 500, and text will be set to totally white rounded. Okay, so when somebody try to click on this model, or this button to be precise, we're going to be firing this function, and in this function we're going to be setting the is open flag to true. Okay, so initially it's going to be set to false, and we are now setting there to true. If I click on this button, nothing will happen. So let me just change the color of that to like crimson 500, or change that to teal 500 or something like that. Yep, we are now getting our teal model button right here. I'm gonna collapse there. And now underneath this button, what do we have to do? We have to specify our model content. So I'm gonna go back, and we have to check if we have the model, like if this is true, then we want to show this UI. But if this is not set to true, then we don't want to show this UI. Okay, so I'll use like motion dev right here. So I'm gonna use like motion, and then set that to motion dev. Okay, and inside this motion dev, we're going to be providing a lot of classes to this. So I'll use like pigs, and then inset will be set to 0, and background will be set to totally black. Background opacity will be set to 50, and flex justify will be set to center. Items will be set to center. I'm gonna save my file, and inside there, when somebody clicks on there, so we're going to be firing this function once again. It's gonna say like set is open, and we want to set there to false. Okay, so that's gonna be it for our model styling. Now inside there, we're going to be defining our motion.div once again and close there. I'll also provide a bit of classes to this one. So background will be set to totally white, and pairing all around will be set to 4, totally rounded. Okay, and yeah, that's gonna be it. Let me just save my file, and inside this div, what do we have to do? We have to just write like h2, which will say like model title, and I'm gonna also style there a bit. I'll use like text only large, font will be set to bold. If I save there and test this out, if I click on there, here you can see it's gonna give us that background of gray, and it's gonna also give us that model content right here. But we have to change there to text only black. If I click on there once again, we are now getting this model title. We are not providing any animation to there right now. We will do that in a few seconds. I'm going to also provide a paragraph which will say like this is some random model content. Come on, content here or something like that. And now if I click on there once again, still we have to change there to text totally black, and save our file. Click on there, and now we are getting the model description as well. Now underneath this paragraph, we are going to be creating a button which will just say like close the model. And now you can also specify different classes to there, like margin for the top will be set to 4, pairing all around will be set to 2, background totally red of 500, and text will be set to totally white rounded. If I save there, click on there once again, and now we are getting this close button right here. If I click on there, it's gonna also hide there. Now finally, let's just provide our animation right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go here and provide my animation right here. So when somebody clicks on there, what do we have to do? We have to take this event object, and we have to use this event object, and we have a stop propagation method on there. So let's just use our stop propagation and execute there. And also for the initial state, what do we have to do? We have to use the y-axis, and on the y-axis we are going to be using like -100 VH. Okay, and also we are going to be providing the animate, and when we want to animate this, we are going to be changing the y-axis to 0 viewport height, and also on the exit crop we are going to be using the y-axis, and it's going to be set to 100 VH. And let's just provide a bit of transitions to that. So I'll use like duration of 0.5 seconds. Okay, I'm gonna save my file. If I click on this, so it's gonna show us this model. If I click on the close, oh, we also have to attach this on click event handler on this one. God damn it. I'm going to use like set is open and set there to false. Yeah, let's just set there to false. So now if I click on there, it's gonna hide there from the UI. You know what, I'm gonna wrap there in the animate presence component, and let's just close there. I'm gonna cut there from there and place there right here. Okay, so if I click on there, it's gonna show us this model, and if I click on there once again, so it's gonna hide this. So now that's looking better. I'm gonna click on the open model, so it's gonna open this model. If I click on there once again, it will make it disappear. You can also click on there and click somewhere else, so it's gonna also hide there from the UI. So that's our amazing model. The next exercise will not be that much complicated, so I'm gonna zoom in a bit. And what do we have to do? We have to create our responsive animation. So what do we have to do? Make a responsive button that animates on the click. Okay, that's gonna be very simple one. Create a button using the motion.button, and then style it by using Tailwind CSS, or you can also use just a pure CSS. Then use the frame on motion while tap prop to animate the button when clicked. So once we click on this, we just want to scale it down a bit. Okay, so we can also provide the hover effect by using the while hover. If you want to give it a shot, you totally can, but yeah, if you don't want to do that, you don't even have to do that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define my responsive button.tsx. Let's just use my RFCE inside there, and go ahead and go to my app and register this component right here, like so. Save my file, go ahead and go to our component, and the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the motion from where? From the framer motion. And now inside there, let's just remove that from here and make that as a motion. Come on, motion.div. And inside this motion div, I'm gonna provide a bit of classes to that. So I'll use like pairing all around will be set to 2, and background blue will be set to 500, text will be set to totally white, rounded, and also we are going to be providing a transition. Transform the duration will be set to 300, and also the ease in and out. Inside there, I'm gonna save my file right now. I'm gonna say like click me. Save my file once again. So if I click on there, nothing will happen. I'm gonna also change the cursor to pointer, and now let's just provide our animation. So I'm going to be using like the while hover. When somebody hover over them, so you want to scale it up to like 1.1, and when somebody tap on there, like while tap, so what do you want to do? We just want to use the scale and provide 0.9 scaling to there. Okay, so if I hover over there, it's gonna pop it up. If I click on there, it's gonna pop it back. Okay, so that was also our simple animation or responsive button, whatever you want to call that. Now let's create the heart accordion component, and I know a lot of you will love this one. So what do we have to do? We have to create an accordion component that expands and also collapses on the click. Create a component that renders a list of items, each with the title and also with the content. So you can use the motion.div to animate the height of the content. You can use the Tailwind CSS for the styling, or you can just use the pure CSS if you wanted to. If you want to give it your best shot, you totally can, but if you don't want to do that, you don't even have to do that. So I'm going to be creating my accordion.tsx file, and inside there, let's just use what RAFC is, save my file, go ahead and register this component right here. Okay, so I'm going to close them, and the first thing that we would need is the motion from the framer motion. Okay, so let's just use our framer motion. Next, we would need some sort of items by which we can iterate over through. So I'll use like const items or content, whatever you want to call them. We would need an array, and inside this array we would have a few objects. So I'll use like title, and I'll say like title 1. I'm gonna also provide the content, and content will say like this is content of item, of item 1, and I'm gonna provide a comma and duplicate there like a few times. Okay, so then I'm going to change there to 2, then 3, and then 4. I'm going to also change there from the item 1 to 2 to 3 and 4. Next, we have to define our state. So I'm going to be using like const open index, and then set is or set open index rather, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to now. And now let me go ahead and go to the UI and remove it from there, and I'm going to provide a bit of classes like space on the x-axis, or not the x but the y-axis will be set to 2. Inside there we have to iterate over through all of the items by using this map method. We have to provide the item and also the index inside there, and let's just iterate over through all of the items. So I'm going to be using a div, and I'm going to also close there like so, and we also have to specify the key, and the key will be coming from this index. So now inside this div, we're going to be first of all defining a button, and this button will have a few classes. So I'll use like width of totally full, and text will be set to left, pairing all around will be set to 2, and background gray will be set to 300, totally rounded, and focus state will be set to outline, outline none. This is our file, and inside this button we're going to be rendering our item.title. When somebody clicks on this button, we're going to be firing this function like when clicked. Let's just fire this function, which is a toggle item function, which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. It's going to be taking an index. So now if I comment this line out and see, so here you can see we are now getting a title 1 and so on and so forth. So that's it for the button. I'm going to comment or hide there for a few seconds, and now underneath this button we're going to be defining our motion.div. Okay, so I'll just close there, and inside this button we're going to be creating our h1. Let's just create our h1, which will say like item.content, and here we have to specify like pairing all around will be set to 2, background gray will be set to 200, and totally rounded. Yep, you are also getting that. I'm gonna also change the text to totally black. Text is totally black, and there, or copy that from there, go to my button and place that right here. Yep, this is looking cool. I'm gonna hide there for a few seconds and provide my animation to this h1 right here. Or you know what, we're not going to be providing our animation to this one. We're going to be providing our animation on this motion there. What the hell am I doing? Okay, so let's just use our overflow first of all. Like overflow will be set to totally hidden, and underneath there we have to provide our initial state, and the height will be set to 0 first of all. I'm going to also provide the animate prop. On this animate prop we are going to be setting the height to if the open index is triple equals to the index which we are now getting. So in that situation, we are going to be setting there to auto, but if that's not the case, we are going to be setting there to 0. And on the transition, we have to specify the duration of 0.3 seconds. And finally, let me just create this function, and I'm gonna uncomment that from here and create this function right here. So I'll use like const toggle item, and it's gonna be equals to this function. Is gonna take an index as a parameter, and I'm gonna annotate that as a number like so, and set open index will be set to, if the open index, if that is equal to the index, in that situation we want to set that to no, but if that's not the case, we want to set that to the index itself. Okay. So you know what, let me just annotate that with any so that it doesn't give us that errors. And now I can click on that, so it's gonna show us this content. I can also click on this, so it's gonna hide these content right here, and they are looking super amazing. You can totally modify the styling to whatever you want, but in my case they are looking great. Now we are going to be creating a notification toaster. So what do we have to do? We have to create a notification toaster that will slide in from the top and trigger. So yeah, if you want to do that by yourself, you can definitely go ahead and do that by yourself. But now I'm going to give you my solutions. So I'll just create this component like toast notification.tsx file. And I'm going to be using my RAFCE inside there, save our file and register there inside our app component. So I'll just provide my toast notification and hit enter, save my file, and use my npm run dev. Because I stopped the server, I am now re-recording this portion. And here you can see we are now getting our toast notification, which is looking amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my toast notification. And the first thing that I want to do is that I want to grab my motion from where? From the framer motion, like so. Next, we also have to create our visibility state. So I'll use like visible, and also set visible, and it's going to be equals to what the hell? It's going to be equals to this use state, and we have to specify the false as a state to there. We already seen all of that stuff like a lot of time, so I'm going to remove that from here, and I'm going to style that a bit. So I'll just provide like flex, and flex will be set to column, and items will be set to center like so. Inside there we have to define our button, and this button will have a classes like margin for the bottom will be set to 4, padding all around will be set to 2, background totally blue of 500, or you know what, let me just change that to the teal of 500, and I'm going to also provide the text of totally white to them and totally rounded. So inside this button I'm going to say like show notifications. I'm going to save this file, and also when somebody clicks on there, we're going to be firing this function which is a show toast right here. So I'm going to copy the name of that and create this function right here. So I'll use like const show toast, and inside this function I'm going to say like set visible and set that to true. Underneath there we are going to be also using a set timeout. Okay, that was fast. I'll just provide like 3000 for a duration, and inside there I'll just set the visibility to false. Okay, so I'm going to save my file, and this is what we have to do right now. I can also remove these curly braces from here if I wanted to. Yep, I can totally do that. So now let me just save my file, and this is now looking better. Now let's just go ahead and go to our UI and create our notification. So I'll use like first of all our visibility. So if that is visible, then we want to show this content. But if that's not visible, we don't want to show nothing at all. So I'm going to be using like motion dev, and I'm going to close there like so. I'll provide the classes like the class will be set to fixed, and also for the top will be set to 4, right will be set to 4, pairing all around will be set to 4, background totally green of 500, text totally white, and totally rounded like so. Okay, so I'll just say like notification and action successful or something like that. If I save this file, check this out. So if I click on there, it's going to show us this notification right here. So it will make it disappear like so. So I'm going to also provide a bit of animation to there. So I'm going to be using like the framer motion. I'll just provide like for the initial state, you want to change the opacity to 0, and also the y-axis will be set to -20. I'm going to also provide the animate prop. On this animate prop, you can specify the opacity to 1, and also on the y-axis you want to set there to totally 0. Now underneath there we can also provide the exit state when this is exiting. So you want to set the opacity to 0, and also on the y-axis you want to set the back to -20. Okay, and we also want to provide a bit of transition to them. So I'll just write like duration, and duration will be set to 0.5. Now let me save my file and click on there, and here you can see it's going to give us that notification right here, and it's going to make it disappear. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to wrap that inside the animate presence, and now I'm going to close that like so. I'll cut that animate presence, and I'll just put that right here. Oh, we have to put that underneath there. Nope, like so. Now if I click on there, so it's gonna show this notification and then it's gonna hide there like so. You can totally change the UI, you can totally change the animation and stuff like that. But now our transformation challenge is totally complete. Welcome to the keyframe practice. So in this one, we're going to be building amazing animation. So yeah, if you want to give it a try by yourself, you can totally do that. Nobody is stopping you to do that. But if you can do that, here is how I would do that. So what do we have to do? First of all, we have to create our bouncing ball. So create a bouncing ball animation using a keyframe. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to create a simple circular div to represent a ball. Then we can use the Framer Motion keyframes to create a bouncing effect. Then we can style it by either using a Tailwind CSS or just using a CSS. So you know what, if you want to give it a try by yourself, you can totally do that. But here is how I would do that. Let's just create our components folder, and inside there we are going to be creating our bouncing ball.tsx file, and I'll use my RAFCE inside there, save that file and register there right here, just like that. I'll use this, save my file, and once again I restarted my computer because there was a problem in my OBS. So you know what, let me just refresh there, and we are now getting there amazingly. I'm gonna also provide a bit of styling to this one, so I'll use like height will be set to screen, and also flex justify will be set to center, and items will also be set to center, and background will be this color. So I'll use like 0D1 and then 017. I'm gonna save my file. Still we are getting that animation, so I'll just use like text only. I mean like not animation but that color. So yeah, that's looking cool. Now let's get into it. The first thing that we have to do is that oh my god, my keyboard is getting super fast. So you know what, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the motion from the Framer Motion. And now inside there we have to define our div. So I'll just remove that from here, and now we are creating a circular box. So I'm gonna call my component like this, or create my div like this. I'm gonna also provide the class names, like the width will be set to 16 like so, and also the height will be set to 16, and background will be set to totally yellow 400, totally rounded and full. I'll save this file, and now let's just provide our animation today. So I'll use like on the animate. Okay, first of all we have to make that as a motion div. So I'll use like motion.div, and then I'm gonna provide the animate prop on there. And inside this animate prop, now we are going to be using our keyframes. So for the y-axis, we want to start from 0, then we want to go to -100, and then we want to go back to the 0. Okay, so this is how our keyframe will look like. Now we can also specify a different transition to there. So I'll use like the duration will be set to 1 second. We can also provide the repeat, and it's going to repeat infinitely. And also on the repeat type, we want to use like loop like so. Come on, loop. And also we are going to be providing the easing, and easing will be set to ease in and out like so. Now if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting this cute and amazing ball, and that was our challenge or our practice number 1. Next, we're going to be creating our pulsing effect. So we have to create a pulsing effect on a button by using the keyframes. So we have to define our motion.button. Then we have to use our keyframe from the Framer Motion to animate the scaling of our button and make it pulse. And yeah, you can also use the Tailwind CSS, or you can use just a pure CSS. So you know what, let's just start working on that. I'm gonna go ahead and define my component right here, which is a pulsing button.tsx. So I'll use like RAFCE inside there, and here I'm gonna also register my component like so. I'll just call this, save my file, and this is how it looks like, and which is looking amazing. Once again, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the motion from the Framer Motion, and inside there I'm gonna be defining my div. So I'll just remove that from here, and inside this one I'm gonna make it as a button. So I'll just say like motion.button, and come on, motion.button like so. It's gonna say like pulse. Now we have to style there. So for the styling, we are not gonna be doing anything crazy, but I'll just provide like pairing all around will be set to 4, and background will be set to totally green 500. Text will be set to totally white and rounded. If I save there, so this is how it's gonna look like. Yep, it is looking awful, I know that. Now we have to specify our animation and also our keyframes. So inside this animate prop, you want to scale there. So for the scale, we want to start from 1, then we want to go into the 1.1, then finally we want to go back to the 1. So that's going to be for our animation. I'm going to also specify the transition, and for this transition we are going to be also providing that same transition, like the duration will be set to 1, the repeat will be set to infinitely, and also the repeat type will be set to loop. Once again, we want to loop through them, and then finally we have to use the easing. So I'll use like ease, and ease will be set to ease in and out. Save our file, and yep, we are now getting this dancing bouncing effect right here on our button. That's cool. Let's go to the third one. So what do we have to do? We have to create our color changer animation. So we have to create a component that will change the color using the keyframes. So we have to define our square div that changes the color continuously, and we have to use the keyframes to define multiple colors for our animation, and we can style it by either using the Tailwind CSS or just a CSS. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my component right here, and the name will be set to color change square.tsx, and I'm going to be using my RAFCE inside there. Go into the app and comment this line out and register my component right here. This is how it looks like right now. Now the first thing that we have to do, like always always, we have to import the motion from where? From the framer motion, and inside there we have to define our div. I'll remove that from here, and I'm gonna call it like so. I'm gonna provide the width, and width will be set to 32. The height will also be set to 32, and inside there let's just provide our animation. I'm gonna have to make that as a motion div, so I'll use like motion.div. Now we can definitely use our animate prop on there, and we have to specify the background color, and on this background color we are going to be using our keyframe. So I'll use like this color, which is FF and then 00, or 4 zeros. We're going to be also providing like hash 00FF00, and we are going to be also using 0000FF, and then finally we have to specify and 1 2 3 4 zeros. That's going to be for our what do we call it, for our background colors. We're going to be also providing a transition there, so let's just provide our transitions, and on this transition we're going to be providing a duration of 3, and the easing will be set to linear, and underneath there we're going to be also providing the repeating, and repeating will be set to infinitely. Let's just check this out, and now we are getting their different colors. So we are getting the teal, crimson, and also green, yellow, and cyan, and so on and so forth. I'm gonna go ahead and do this sliding text effect right now. So what do we have to do? We have to create a text component that slides in from the left by using the keyframes. So we have to create our component, like text component, and also we have to use the keyframes to define the movement from off screen to its final position, and then we can style that by either using the Tailwind CSS or just using a pure CSS. This one is going to be super simple. So we have to create our component and just define our RAFCE inside there. Now we have to go into our app and register this component right here, just like that. Just like that, as Uncle Bob said, just like that. So we are going to be defining our component like so. Okay, so let's just import our motion. Come on, motion from where? From our framer motion, and also we have to create our h1 inside there. So I'll just replace that with motion.h1, and this h1 will say like I don't know, slide in text or something like that. I'm gonna change that to in, and now we have to specify our classes. So I'll use like text to Excel, and font will be set to bold, text will be set to totally white, and I'm gonna save this file. This is how it looks like right here. And now we have to specify our animation. So I'll use like on the initial start, we want to start from the x-axis, and the x-axis will be starting from 100%. Now you want to animate to the x-axis of 0, and then finally we have to specify our transitions, and for this transition we're going to be providing a duration of 1. Save our file, refresh there, and here you can see our text will now slide in from the left to the right. Next, we're going to be creating a zigzag animation, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So what do we have to do? We have to create a zigzag animation for a box moving across the screen. So create a square box by using the motion.div, and then use the keyframes to animate that box in a zigzag pattern. Then you can use a Tailwind CSS or just a CSS for the styling. And yeah, you can give it your best shot if you wanted to, but in my case, I'm going to just create this component right here. And I'll use my RAFCE, go to my app and register there. Right in here. Oh my god, let's just register there like so. Okay, so let's just go ahead and start working on that. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to import the motion from the framer motion. Inside there we are going to be defining our div, so I'll just remove that, and I'm going to replace that as a motion.div like so, and I'm gonna close there. Next, we have to specify the styling. So I'll use like width will be set to 16, and height will also be set to 16. Background will be set to totally green of 500. And now let's just provide our animation to there. So for the animate class, we're going to be providing keyframes. So let's just start from the x-axis. So you want to start from 0, then you want to go to 50, then you want to start from 0, then you want to go to the minus 50, then you want to go to the 0 once again. On the y-axis, we're going to be doing there once again. So I'll just copy there and place there right here. Okay. Now underneath there, oh, I forgot to remove this minus from here. And now underneath there, we have to create our transitions. And for these transitions, I'm going to provide a duration, and duration will be 2 seconds. I'm going to also provide the repeat, and repeat will be, come on, let's just provide our repeat, and repeat will be set to infinity. And I'm going to also provide the easing, and for this easing, let's just set that to ease in and out. So I'll save my file, and let me just start there from scratch. So here you can see we're now getting this box, and it is now animating as a zigzag animation. So yeah, that's also cool. You can totally modify there, and you can change the colors of there if you wanted to. You can also change the border radius and all of that kind of stuff if you wanted to. But now let's get into the sixth one. So what do we have to do? We have to create our wave effect. So create a wave effect using a series of boxes. So first of all, we have to define a series of boxes in a row. Then we have to use the keyframes to animate each box with a slight delay to create a wave effect. Then we can use the Tailwind CSS or just a CSS. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define my waveeffect.tsx file, and I'm going to be using my RAFCE inside there. And first of all, we have to import the motion from the framer motion like so. Then we have to define our boxes. So I'm going to be using like const boxes. It's going to be equals to array.from, and here we have to specify the length, and the length will be set to 5. Now here inside there, I'm going to remove that from here, and I'm going to provide the class names of flex, and also space will be set to x-axis of 2. Inside this div, we want to iterate over through all of their boxes, and now we want to use the map method on there. We don't need the data, but we do need the index. And here I'm going to be using my motion.dev and close there like so. Okay, so now let's just start working on there. The first thing that we want to do is that we want to specify the index to there. Next, we also want to provide a bit of styling, so I'll use like width will be 6 to 16, and height will also be set to 16. Background will be set to purple, and purple 500. And now underneath there, let's just animate there. So for the animation, we want to set the y value to start from 0 and then go to minus 20 and then go to the 0. So that's going to be it for the keyframe. And now let's just provide a bit of transition to that. So I'll use the transition, and inside this transition, we have to specify the duration of 0.6. I'm going to also provide the repeat value and set that to infinity. The repeat type will be set to reverse because we want to reverse it out, and also provide a delay to there. So I'll use like index times 0.1. Now that's it. Now let me just go ahead and refresh there. I guess I didn't, let me just copy there and go ahead and go to my app. Okay, we have to comment this line out. We have to render our component like so. So here you can see we're now getting the zigzag animation. So now let me just refresh there. And now we are, like not a zigzag animation, but our wave effect. So you can also change the border radius of there. You can also change the colors of there. You can also move it around. You can do a lot of stuff with there. But in my case, that's going to be it. So yeah, what do we have to do next? For the final one, we have to create our background animation. Create a background that changes the color using a keyframes. So we have to create a full screen div that acts as a background, and we can use the keyframes to animate that background color through multiple colors. And we can style that by using either a Tailwind CSS or just a pure CSS to ensure that it covers the entire screen. I'm going to create my component right here inside this components folder with the name of animated background.tsx. Now I'll use the RAFCE and go ahead and register there right here just like that. As soon as I registered there, we are now getting our animated background, which is looking cool. So now let me go into this component and start working on there. So I'll use like import the motion from where? From the framer motion. I'm going to remove this text and convert that to as a motion div. So I'll use like motion.dev. I'm going to also specify the class name, and the width will be set to screen. The height will also be set to screen. And inside there, we have to provide the animate prop. And on this animate prop, we are going to be providing our keyframe. So I'll use like the background color, and it's going to be set to this background color. So let's just start from this one. And background colors are going to be set to these colors. Now underneath that, we also have to specify the transitions. So I'll use like the transitions, and for this transition we have to specify the duration of 5 seconds rather, and the easing will be set to linear in this case. And also we have to provide the repeat and set that to infinity. I'm gonna save my file. Check this out. So here you can see we are now getting this div or background color animation or whatever you want to call there, and that's also looking cool. So yeah, we built a lot of stuff in this project, or not a project but a lot of animation. So now let me just show you all of them in action. So we created the bouncing animation, the pulsing button, and also the color changer, the sliding text, and zigzag, and also the wave animations. This is super amazing. Yeah, that's super amazing. Welcome to the variants practice slash challenge, whatever you want to call that. So what do we have to do? The first thing that we have to do is that we have to create a simple fade in component. Then we have to create our navigation menu with the slide animation. Then we have to create a tooltip with variants, and also we have to create a toggler switch, or toggler, whatever you want to call it, toggler switch. There we go. So then we have to create a progress bar animation, and finally we have to create our dynamic list animation. So let's start from the first one. So create a component that fades in when it appears. Define a variant for the fade in effect. Create a motion.div that uses that variant. Then you can use either the Tailwind CSS or just a CSS for the styling. I'm gonna go ahead and create my components folder right here, components, and inside there we're going to be defining our fade in component.tsx, and I'll use my RAFCE inside there. Go ahead and go to my app and register there right here. So I'll use like fade in component and close there like so. I'm gonna save this file, and now let me also provide a bit of styling, like height will be set to screen, legs, and also justify will be set to center, and items will also be set to center, and background will be this color. So we have 0D1017. Close there, and this is how it looks like. I'm gonna also provide the text of totally white today, and that's looking cool. First thing that we have to do is that we have to define, we have to grab the motion from where? From the, let's just grab the motion from the framer motion. There we go. Next we have to remove them and provide our h2, which will also have the text of, come on, h2 with the class of text only white. There we go, white. There we go. And I'm gonna say fade in component. Save our file. Check this out. So now we are getting our fade in component. I'm gonna also provide a bit of classes to this div. So I'll use like class name of background totally blue 500, and pairing all around will be set to 4, totally rounded, and shadow. Check this out. So we are now getting our kind of a button or whatever you want to call there. Now we have to define our variants. I'm going to create my variants separately, and you can definitely provide them inside your div. So I'll use like const fade in variants. It's going to be set to this object. Inside there we have to define the hidden property, and when it is hidden, so we want to change the opacity to 0, and when it is visible, so in that situation we are going to be changing the opacity to 1. As simple as this. So now let's just use that right here. First of all, we have to convert that to the motion.div, and now we can definitely use that right here. So I'll use like the variants, and I'm going to go ahead and copy this variable name and place that right here, which means like I can now use the hidden prop and also the visible one. I'm going to provide the initial state, and for this initial state we're going to be using our hidden, which we define right here. I'm going to also use the animate, and when it is on the animate we are going to be setting that to visible. I'm going to also provide a transition, and for this transition we want to provide a duration, and duration will be set to 0.5, just like that. Check this out, and now let me just refresh there, and here you can see we are now getting this fade in and also fade out. Okay, that's amazing. I can also change that to like 2 seconds maybe, and now if I refresh there, now this is looking better. Let's start work on the second one, so which is create a navigation menu with the slide animation. So what do we have to do? We have to create a navigation menu that slide in from the side. So we have to define a variant for the open and close state for the menu. We can use the motion.div for the menu, and we can also use like either the Tailwind CSS or just a CSS for the styling. So yeah, if you want to give it your best shot, you can definitely go ahead and do that. But in my case, I'm going to define my slide in or sliding menu.tsx file. I'm going to be using the RAFCE, save our file, and register there right here inside our app. So I'll use like slide and just register there right here. This is how it looks like right now. Let's just go ahead and start working on that. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab the motion from where? From the framer motion. Next, we have to define our state. So I'm going to be using like is open, and then set is open, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and provide our false value for the initial state. That's also done. I'm going to remove that from here, and inside there we are going to be creating our button, and for this button we are going to be providing like pairing all around will be set to 2, background will be set to gray of 500, text will be set to totally white. And when somebody try to click on there, we're going to be firing this function which is a set is open and set there to not set is open. So I'm going to save this file, and for the text we're going to be providing like toggle menu. If I save there, this is how it looks like right here. And you know what, I'm going to also make the a bit rounded, so I'll use like rounded SM. Yep, that's looking cool. Or you know what, we don't have to do that. Okay, so I'm going to remove that from here. Next, I'm going to collapse there, and we have to define our navigation menu. So I'm going to be using a div, and now inside this div, you know what, first of all, let me just put a bit of styling to there. So I'll use like for the class name, I'm going to set that to fixed, will be set to 0, left will be also set to 0, width will be set to 64, and the height will be set to totally full. Background will be set to totally blue of 600. And inside there, we have to define our UL with the class of pairing all around will be set to 4. Text will be set to totally white. Inside there, let's just provide our li, which will have the text of home, then about, and then finally the contact right here. So if I save there, here you can see we are now getting this amazing sidebar. But yeah, you get the idea. It's not the most cool looking sidebar, but you get the idea. Next, we have to define our menu variant. So I'm going to go ahead and define my menu variants, and here we have to specify the open. When it is open, so we want to set the x value to 0, and when it is closed, so we want to set the x value to -100%. That's what we have to do right now. I'm gonna go ahead and apply there on this div. First of all, we have to convert that to the motion.div. Also change this one to the motion.div like so. And we are going to be using our variants right here. So I'll use like not a viewport but a variants, and variants will be set to this menu variants, and which means like I can now use the initial prop, and that's going to be set to the closed, and also I can animate there. And we are going to be using a JavaScript ternary right here. So is open, if it is open, so in there come on is open. So if it is, oh, you know what, we are providing a double quote, so that's why. Okay, so now if this is open, in that situation, we want to set that to open. But if that's not the case, we want to set that to closed. Underneath there, I'm going to also provide a bit of transitions to there. So I'll use like transition. And on this transition, we want to provide the duration, and duration will be set to 0.3. Check this out. So now if I click on there, it's going to show this sidebar. If I click on there once again, it's going to hide there. And that's looking somewhat of cool, maybe. Yeah, I wouldn't call it cool, but yeah, we are getting this amazing animation by using our variants. Next, we have to create a tooltip with variants. So create a tooltip that appears and disappear with the fade effect. So what do we have to do? We have to define a variant for the visible and hidden state of the tooltip. We can use the motion.div for the tooltip, and we can also provide a styling by using either the Tailwind CSS or just a pure CSS. So I'm going to go ahead and create a component with the name of tooltip.tsx, and let's just define our tooltip inside there. Go ahead and comment this line out and define our tooltip right here. Save our file. Go ahead and go to the tooltip and grab the motion from the framer motion like so. First thing first, we have to define our state. So I'll use like visible and then set visible. It's going to be equals to the uState and now scroll uState, and for the initial value we're going to be setting there to false. Now let's take care of our UI. So I'm going to remove them and provide a bit of classes to them. So the class will be set to relative and inline and block block there like so. Inside there we are going to be defining our button, which will say like hover over me or something like that. I'm gonna also provide the classes for this one. So pairing all around will be set to 2, background totally blue of 500, text will be set to totally white like so. Now I'm gonna attach 2 event handlers, so which means like when somebody mouse enter, so in that situation we are going to be firing this function which is a set visible and set there to true. And also we are going to be providing like when somebody mouse leaves, so then we are going to be still firing that same function, but we are going to be changing the value to false. Okay, that's it for this button. I'm gonna collapse there, and now underneath this button we have to define our data. So if this is visible, so in that situation we are going to be showing this data. So I'll use like motion.div and close there, and it's gonna say like, come on, tool and then tip, god damn it, tooltip, there we go, tooltip content or something like that. So if I hover my mouse over to there, so it's gonna show us that tooltip, and if I leave it back, so it's gonna hide there. Now I'm gonna go ahead and define my variants. So I'll just define there right here. I'll give the name of like tooltip tooltip variants or something like that. And when it is hidden, we're going to be changing the opacity to 0, and on the y-axis is going to be set to -10. And I'm going to duplicate that and change that to VISIBLE and set that to 1. Instead of providing a minus, we have to set there to only 0. I'm going to copy the name of that, go to our tooltip dev, and here I'm going to be using that. Let's just provide our variants, not a viewport, variants, and set there to this tooltip variant. Now underneath there, we have to use the inline. Why am I saying inline? Initial state, and for this initial state, we want to set there to hidden, and when it is animating, so we are going to be setting there to VISIBLE for the visible state. We're going to be also providing an exit prop, and when it is exit, so we want to set there to hidden. I will also provide a bit of transitions to this. So for these transitions, I'll provide a duration of 0.2 seconds right here. I'll also provide a bit of classes like absolute, ABSOLUTE. Background will be set to gray of 700, and also text will be set to totally white. Padding all around will be set to 2, totally rounded. Let me just save our file, test this out. So if I hover my mouse over to there, it's going to give us that tooltip, but if I leave it back, it's going to hide there. And as you can see, it is not looking that much cool, but yeah, we are getting this tooltip, or you can say our animated tooltip right here. That's also done. What do we have to do next? We have to create our toggle switch animation, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So create a toggle switch that animates between the on and also on the off state. Then we have to define a variant for the on and also for the off position on the switch. So you can use the motion.div to represent the switch, and you can use the Tailwind CSS or just a CSS for the styling. Let's just do that. I'm going to create a toggle switch.tsx file and define my array FCE inside there. Save there and go ahead and register there right here inside our app. So I can use the toggle switch. Go ahead and go to this toggle switch and grab the motion from the framer motion like so. Next we have to define our state. So I'll use like is open and then not open but is on, and then set is on. It's going to be equals to this use state, and the initial value will be set to false. Underneath there, we're going to be taking care of the UI, so I'll just remove them and provide a classes to there. So relative and also inline block, and width will be set to 36, and the height will also be, or you know what, the height will be set to 16. Inside this div, we are going to be defining our own div, and which will have the class name of, you know what, we're going to be providing a dynamic classes for there. So we can use like the width will be set to totally full, the height will also be set to full, totally rounded, rounded, and then full. Background will be set to totally gray of 300 like so, and cursor will also be set to pointer. Now we can render our state totally dynamically. So I can use like, you know, first of all, let me just save there, and I can make a bit of room, and now I can use like if is open, which is our state. Like if our state is set to open, if that is set to true, what do you want to do? You want to change the background to totally green of 500, but if that's not the case, you want to set there to empty string. Okay, and I'm going to also provide the on click when handler on there. So when somebody try to click on there, we're going to be firing this function which will say like set is on and set there to is on like so. And you know what, let me just show you there. So this is how it looks like right here, but inside there we have to create our ball. Okay, not my balls, but we have to create our ball. So I'm going to be using like motion div and close there like so. I'm going to provide a bit of classes to there like absolute. Top will be set to 1, left will be set to 1, width will be set to 14, height will also be set to 14, totally rounded, and background will be set to totally white, shadow, like so. Inside this div, we have to provide our animations, but before I provide the animations, I'm going to go ahead and go to the top and create my variants right here. So I'll use like const switch variants, and it's going to be equals to this object. We can provide the off state, and when it is off, so we can set that to 0, and also on the on state, let me just change that to the on. You want to set that to 70. Now that's totally done. I'm going to copy the name of that and provide my animations right here. So let's just use our variants. And here we have to specify our switch variant. And on the animate, we want to set that to totally dynamically. So which means like we're going to be using only one curly braces. If our state is set to open or on, you want to provide the on state. But if that's not the case, so you want to set that to off. I'm going to also provide a bit of transitions right here, and for this transition we're going to be setting the type to totally spring, one of my favorite animation type, and the stiffness will be set to 300 like so. And here you can see we're now getting our ball. Now if I click here, so it's going to move it right here. If I click on there, it's going to move it there. So this is how we are going to be creating our basic animated toggler. You can also change the transition of there if you don't like that. But in my case, that's looking super amazing. So yeah, that's number, I don't know what our number there was. That's number 4. There we go. Alright guys, so welcome to the gesture based practice animation. So in this one, we are going to be building amazing gesture based animation. So first of all, we are going to be creating a swappable card, then draggable box, then rotate on drag. Also tap to change the color, long press to change size, and finally we are going to be building a gesture based image gallery. So now let's start from the first one, which is a swappable card. So how are we going to be doing that, and what exactly we are going to be doing? First of all, we have to create a card that can be swapped to the left or to the right to remove it from the view. First, we have to create a motion.div to represent the card. Then we can use the framer motion drag prompt to detect the swap gesture. Finally, we have to animate that card position based on a swap. So if you want to give it your best shot, you definitely go ahead and can do that. But you know what, here is how I would do that. I'm going to create a components folder, and inside there, we're going to be creating swappable card.tsx. And let's just use our RAFCE, save there, and go to our app and register there right here. So we are going to be using a swappable card, save our file, and this is how it looks like right here. I know it is not looking that great, but we are going to be making it great right now. So I'll use like height will be set to totally screen, flex and justify will be set to center, and items will also be set to center. Background will be set to this color, which is 0D1017. Close there, save our file. This is how it looks like. I'm gonna also provide the text of totally white to there, and yep, now that's looking cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and start working on that. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the motion from where. Let's just use the motion from where, from the framer motion. Now inside there we have to define our state. So I'll use like is removed and then set is removed, and it's gonna be equals to this u state, and the initial value I'm gonna set there to false. Now let's define our div. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to write like swipe me or something like that, and I'm going to also provide a bit of styling to this. So I'll just say like class name, and we are going to be also using the dynamic classes. So I'll use like width will be set to 64, and the height will be set to 32, and background will be set to blue 500, totally rounded, come on, rounded large. And we are going to be also providing a shadow of totally large. Flex and items will be set to totally center. Justify, come on, justify, oh my god, justify will also be set to center, and text will be also set to totally white. So now let me just save my file. This is how it looks like right here. Now we are going to be also providing our state right here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to render that totally dynamically. So I'll use like if this is removed, so if that's the case, so we're going to be using the hidden prop. But if that's not the case, we are going to be setting there to empty string. So now let me just save my file. I'm going to also attach the event handler, which will say like on drag end, and it's going to be equals to this handle swipe. I'm going to copy the name of that and create this function right here. So I'll use like const handle swipe, and it's going to take 2 parameters. So it's going to take like the data. We are not interested in that. I'm going to also annotate that as any prop, and I'm going to also provide the info. And info can be a string, or you know, I'm going to also set that to null. What the hell? Or not null, but just any. Okay, so now let's just check. If we have the info.offset.x value, if that is greater than 100, so in that situation we are going to be using like set is removed, and we are going to be setting that to true, and which means like if we swipe that to the right, then we want to remove that. Okay, swipe right to remove. But if that's not the case, we are going to be also providing yet another check, which will be info.offset.x value. If that is less than -100, so in that situation we are going to be still using like set is removed, and we are going to be setting that to true in that case. Okay, so now let me just save my file. Now let me also provide the drag, and drag will be set to, you know what, first of all we have to make that as a motion div. So I'll use like motion.div, and now I'm going to use my drag, and we are going to be setting that to the x-axis only. I'm going to also provide the drag constraints, and for these drag constraints I'm going to provide the left value, and left value will be set to -100, and the right value will be set to only 100. Oh, this should be motion.div. Okay, so I'll just remove this, save my file. Check this out, so I can only swap that to the left and also to the right. So if I do this, it's going to remove that from the view, and here you can see if I just swap that right here and leave my cursor, bang, it's gone. Now let me try that once again. So if I just put that right here or drag that right here is going to remove them from the DOM. So yeah, this is our simple swap component that we wanted to create. So now let me just remove them, and now next we are going to be working on the draggable box. So what we have to do, we have to create a box that can be draggable around the screen. Okay, so we have to use like motion.dev, and we have to use the framer motion drag prop for the functionality. And also we can either use the Tailwind CSS, or we can just use a pure CSS. That's going to be quite simple and easy. So I'm going to go ahead and create this component right here with the name of draggable-box.tsx. And let's just use our RAFCE inside there. I'm going to register there right here inside my app. So I'm going to comment that line out and grab my draggable box and close them. Here you can see we're now getting there, which is looking cool. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to grab the motion, motion motion from where? From the framer motion. That's going to be the first thing. Next, we have to remove this draggable box, and I'm going to say like drag me or something like that. Now I'll also change that to the motion.dev. So I'll use like motion.dev. Now let me provide a bit of styling to this. So I'll use like width will be set to 32. Height will also be set to 32. Background will be set to totally green 500 and totally rounded large. And shadow will be also set to large. And this is how it looks like right here. So you know what, let me just provide my animation. So I'll use like the drag, and I'm gonna also provide a drag constraints right here. So for these drag constraints, I'm gonna set the left value to 0 and the right value will be set to 300, not 1000 but 300. On the top we are going to be setting that to 0. On the bottom we are going to be setting that to 300. So now let me just save that, and we can drag that to the left, to the right, and also to the top, and also to the bottom. Okay, so yeah, this is how it looks like, and I can totally remove that, also remove that one, and provide my closing tag. Yep, this is looking better. We can also change the color of that to like crimson or cyan, and come on, cyan, there we go. And yeah, it is looking kind of cool, but yeah, this is how it looks like. Next we have to create the rotate on drag. So what do we have to do? We have to create a box that rotates when we drag there. So we have to use motion.dev to represent a box. We have to use the on drag event to calculate the rotation angle. Then we have to animate the rotation of the box based on the drag moment. So you know what, let's just start working on that. I'm gonna go ahead and create my component with the name of rotate on drag in .tsx. And let's just use our RAFCE inside there. Go to the app, comment this line out, and render the right in here. Save this file, and here you can see we are now getting this text, which means like everything is working the way we expect him to work. So I'll just go to the top and import my motion from where? From the framer motion. Next we have to define our rotation. So I'll use like rotation and then set rotation. It's going to be equals to the u state, and the initial value will be set to 0. And now we have to make that as a rotatable box. So I'll just change that to the motion.dev, and here we have to specify that, you know, let me just hit enter right here, drag, and also we have to use our own drag event, and here we're going to be passing our handle drag, which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. So you know what, let's just do that. I'm going to copy the name of that and define this function right here. So I'll use like const and then handle drag. It's going to take event as an object, so I'm going to just annotate that with any for now. Also it's going to take the info, and I'm going to also annotate that as a any. So inside there we're going to be using our new rotation. It's going to be set to rotation times the info dot offset dot x value. So basically these are just the calculation of the rotation based on our drag. Okay, so I'll just provide that for our rotation state. So I'll use like new rotation, and I'm going to save this file. Okay, so we don't need that. You know what, I'm going to just provide that and annotate that with any. Now this looking better. I'm going to go ahead and provide a bit of styling today. So I'll use like class name, and width will be set to 32. Height will also be set to 32. Background will be set to totally red of 500. Totally rounded large, and flex items will be set to center. Justify will also be set to center. And it's going to say like drag me or something like that. Let me check this out. So if I drag there, it is not rotatable. So we have to provide our style. So for this style, I'm going to be setting the rotate property to the rotation, which is coming from our state right here. I'm going to test this out. So if I drag there, here you can see it is now rotating. I know the rotation is a bit funky, but yeah, this is what it is. I'm going to also provide a bit of duration to this. So I'll use like transition, and here I'm going to define my duration, and duration will be set to maybe 3 seconds. Okay, and now let me just refresh there, and still we are getting there super fast, but yeah, you get the idea. So that's also cool. So let's just remove that line of code. And next we have to create our tap on change color. So create a box that changes the color when we tap on it. So create a motion.div for the box and then use the on tap event to change the box color. You can either use a Tailwind CSS or just CSS for the classes. I mean, like for the styling. So yeah, let's just work on that. I'm gonna go ahead and define my component right here with the name of tap to change color.tsx, and I'm gonna be using my RAFCE inside there. Let's just go into the app, comment this line out, and register my component right here. I'm gonna go ahead and first of all we have to import the main thing, which is the motion object. From where? From the framer motion. Next we have to define our colors. So this is how our color will look like. So we have a blue, green, red, and also the yellow color, which are the Tailwind CSS classes. Next we have to define our color state. So I'm going to be using like color index, and then we have to set that to the set color index, and it's going to be equals to the use state. And here we have to annotate the or provide value of 0 to the. I'm going to remove that from here and change that to tap me, and change that to the motion.div. I'm going to be providing a classes, so I'll use like class names, and we're going to be rendering our classes totally dynamically. So I'll use like width will be set to 32, height will also be set to 32, and let's just render our colors. So I'm going to be using like colors. You know what? We have to get their colors, god damn it. So I'll use like colors, and then color index we're going to be providing there right here. So essentially these colors are coming from these main colors, and now we are providing a specific index to them. So which means like it's going to start from 0 and then we will increment there. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to provide like rounded, large, and flex, and items. Come on, items will be set to totally center, and justify will also be set to totally center. I'm gonna save this file right now, and when somebody tap on it, so let's just use the on tap, not capture, but when somebody use the on tap, then we want to fire this function, which is a handle tap function. So I'm gonna copy the name of that and register this function right here. So I'm gonna go back and use handle tap, and it's gonna be equals to this arrow function, and inside there we have to use the set color index and provide our previous index, and here we have to use like the previous index plus 1, and we are going to be rounding them by using this modulo operator, and then we have to get the colors dot length. So we wanted to divide both of these value and get the remainder of them by using this modulo operator. So that's done. We don't need this color from the framer motion. And you know what, let's just try this out. Here tap me, if I click on there, here you can see it's going to change the color to, whenever I click on this, it's going to just change the color. But I'm going to also provide the cursor of pointer to this. So cursor will be set to pointer. Come on, let's just write the pointer. And now if I click on this, so anytime I click on this, it's going to just change the color to these different colors, which we are now specifying right here. That's also something that I want to show you that we can build. Next, we have to create long press to change the size. So create a box that changes the size when we long press on them. So you can use the motion.div and on tab and animate the size of there. So yeah, let's just do that. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to create our component with the name of long press to change the size.tsx. In RAFCE, go to our app and register there right here. So long press to change the size. I'm gonna go into this component, and first of all we have to grab the motion object from the framer motion. So motion from where? From the framer motion. And next we have to provide the size. So I'll use like is large, and then set is large is going to be equals to the use state, and provide the initial value of false to them. I'm going to remove them and change that to, you know, first of all change that to the motion.div, and I'm going to also provide a bit of classes to this. So I'll use like the class of come on, width will be set to 32, height will be also set to 32, and background will be set to totally blue 500, rounded totally large, and the flex items will be set to totally center, and justify will also be set to totally center, and transition will be set to all, and duration will be set to 300. I'm going to also change the cursor to totally pointer, and here we have to render our data dynamically. So if we have the large icon, so we are going to be using like width will be set to 48, come on 48, and also the height will be set to 48. But if that's not the case, we are going to be setting there to empty string like that. And for the label, I'll just provide like long press me or something like that. And if I save this file, check this out. If I click on there, nothing will happen. Now I can provide my events. So I can use like on tap start and here we can specify the handle long press start. I'm going to be creating that in a few seconds. Now let me define another event which will be the on tap cancel, and here we have to specify the handle long press end. And now finally we have to define the on tap, and here we're going to be using like handle long press end one more time. Okay, first of all we are going to be creating this function. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define this function right here, and now we're not going to be doing anything crazy, but we're going to be using like set is large and change that to true. Now that's done, we have to create this function. So I'm going to copy the name of that and duplicate this line of code and change the name of that to handle long press end, and I'm going to set that to false in this case. So now if I save my file, test this out. So if I click on that, it's going to increase the size of that, but if I leave it down, it's going to back it to its normal size. Next we have to create a gesture based image gallery. So create an image gallery that can be navigated using a vertical swipe gesture. So you can use the motion.diff for the gallery that contains the images. Implement the swipe gesture to navigate between images vertically and down, and then use the animate presence for the smooth transitions between the images. So let's just do that. I'm gonna go ahead and create my component right here with the name of gesture based image gallery.tsx and define my component, and go ahead and go to our file and register that right in here just like that. I'm gonna close that. Let's just go ahead and define that, remove that one. You know, I'm gonna remove every single thing and go to this gesture function or component rather. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab the motion object from the framer motion. That's going to be the first thing. Next we have to render these images. You can get these images from my GitHub repository, or if you want to use your own images, you are more than welcome to use them. Now we have to create our current index for our image. So I'll use like const current index and then set current index, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove that from here and provide my class name. First of all, we are going to be providing the relative class. Width will be set to 72, the height will be set to 72 once again, and overflow will be set to not overline but overflow will be set to totally hidden. Inside there, what do we have to do? We have to create our animate presence for the smooth transition. So I'll use like animate presence and close it, and inside this animate presence we are going to be defining our image. So I'll use like img to define my image, but first of all we have to convert this image to the motion.image. Okay, so for the source we are going to be using the, what do we call it, the images. Come on, this images, you know, let me just go to the top. We are going to be using this variable which is now holding all of their images, and I'm going to place that right here, and inside there we have to specify this current index right here. So I'm going to copy the name of that and place there, but what the hell am I doing? We have to convert that to the curly braces like so. I'm going to also convert that one, and for the alternative text I'll just change that to, I don't know, maybe slide, and then I'm going to provide that current index right here. So current index, and I'm going to save my file. So this is how currently things looks like. And I also forgot that I'm going to also provide the key, and that key will be coming from the current index. So now let's just save that. Now that's looking better. I can also make it draggable, so I can use like drag on the y-axis. In this case I'm going to also provide a drag constraint to there, and for these drag constraints we're going to be using like top will be set to totally 0 and bottom will be also set to 0. Okay, and now let's just use the on drag end function, and here we're going to be creating this function like handle swipe. I'm going to copy the name of that and create this function right here. So once again we're going to be defining this function. It's not going to take any data. We're going to be annotating there with any, and now we have to also annotate the information to any. And now we have to check if we have the info dot, come on, offset dot y value greater than 100. So in this situation we are going to be setting the current value to the previous, current value to the previous one, and let's just remove 1 from this. So I'll use like previous minus 1 and then times the images dot length. Okay, and we also have to divide there. So if I want to divide there, first of all we have to wrap there inside these parentheses, and then I'm going to divide there by the images dot length. Let's just use the images dot length right here. So that's the formula to swipe it down. Now if that's not the case, so what do we have to do? We have to use our else if block and use our info dot offset on the y-axis if that is less than minus 100. So in that situation we're going to be setting the current index to the previous one, and then we can multiply there. So I'll use like previous times 1, and I'm gonna also wrap them inside the parentheses, and then let's just divide all of them by images.length. Okay, that was a lot of talking. I'm gonna save this file right now, and now let me test this out. If I drag there, nothing is happening. Okay, nothing is happening right now. So I'm gonna also provide the initial and all of that kind of transition. So I'll use like initial, and for the initial we're going to be providing the opacity, and opacity will be set to 0. So that's going to be the initial stage of my animation. And when we want to animate there, then we're going to be increasing the opacity to 1, and also on the exit we want to set the opacity to totally 0. I'm going to also provide the class name, and the class name will be set to totally full width. It will also be set to totally full and totally rounded. So now let me just save there, test this out, and if I swipe there to the top, we're not getting a new image. I don't know why. Let's just test this out. Oh, this shouldn't be times. This should be a plus symbol. Now let me save there, and if I drag that to the top, still nothing is happening. And this should be a plus. So now let me write a plus, and now let me just test this out. Here you can see it's going to remove there from the DOM. And now if I swipe there to the top, it's going to remove that image. It's going to give us the new image. If I scroll there to the bottom, it's going to remove there and gives us a new image like so. So yeah, that's amazing looking gallery. If you care about that, you can implement that in your projects. But if you don't care about that, you don't even have to worry about that. So yeah, that was the gesture practice. Welcome to the stagger animation practice. So in this one, we're going to be building amazing animation. So first of all, we are going to be creating a stagger list item, then the stagger image gallery, then the stagger button press, stagger grid layout, and finally we are going to be building a stagger text review. Starting from the first one, we create a list item that animates into a view with a stagger effect. And you guys already know what a stagger effect is. So what do we have to do? We have to create an array of items like strings or something like that. Then we can use the motion.div to display each item, implement a stagger effect so that each item appears one after the other when the component first mounts. So now let's start working on that. So I'm going to go ahead and create my components folder, and inside there we're going to be defining a stagger list.tsx file. I'm going to be using the RAFCE, and now let me just save them. I'm going to go ahead and go to my app and register that component right here, just like that. This is how it looks like. So I'm going to also provide a bit of classes to it. So the height will be set to totally screen, flex and justify will be set to totally center, and items will also be set to center. Background will be set to this background like 0D1017. I'm going to save my file, and this is how it looks like. I always forget this text of white. So yeah, that's looking great. And the first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab the motion from where? From the framer motion. Next we have to define our items. So I'm going to be using like items, and I'll say like item 1, and then item 2, and then I don't know, item 3, and also item 4, finally item 5, and I guess that's going to be fine. Next we have to go into the UI and remove them and change them to the motion.div. Inside them we have to iterate over through all of that items. So I'm going to be using like items.map method. We want to get the item and also its index. So now inside them, what do we have to do? We have to first of all create our motion.li, and inside this li, first of all we're going to be providing the key, and the key will be coming from that index. I'm going to also provide a bit of classes to this. So margin for the bottom will be set to 2, pairing all around will be set to 5, background yellow 300 like so. Okay, and here we are going to be rendering each of the items. So I'll just save my file, test this out. So yeah, we are now getting these amazing items. Yeah, you get the idea. Next we have to define our variants. So I'll just define like constagger, come on, stagger stagger variants, and it's going to be equals to this object, and we are going to be providing the hidden property, and the opacity will be set to 0. I'm going to also duplicate that and change that to visible, and change the opacity to only 1. I'm gonna go ahead and provide my variants right here as well. We can also make this separately if you wanted to, but you know what, I guess that's gonna be fine. So I'll use like variants, and inside there we have to provide our visible flag. So VISIBLE, and inside that visible we're going to be using the transition, and for this transition TRANSITION, for this transition, I already explained that we have a stagger children property. So we're going to be using the stagger children and provide a 0.2 delay for each element to animate. Now I'm going to use this stagger variant. So I'm going to copy the name of that and use that inside our li. So I'll use like variants and provide there right here. Let's just save our file, test this out. So now if I just refresh there, nothing is happening. I don't know why, but now let's just test this out. Oh, that's because we also have to use the initial state. So I'll use like the initial state and set that to hidden. I'm gonna also use the animate, and for this animate we're going to be setting there to visible. And now let's just refresh there, and now we are getting like each item one by one. 1 2 3 4 5. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this item from there, and also I'm gonna change there to, instead of a li, I'm gonna change there to div. Now that's looking better. So if I just refresh there, yep, that's looking cool. I can also change the timing of that to like 1 second or something like that, and refresh there. 1 2 3, bang bang. That's cool. What do we have to do next? I'm gonna go in there, and next we have to define our stagger image gallery. So what do we have to do? We have to create an image gallery where the image fades in with the stagger effect when loaded. Yeah. Create array with image URLs, and then use the motion.image to display each image, and then implement the stagger effect for each image to fade in as they loaded. So let's just start working on that. I'm gonna go ahead and go to our component folder and register my stagger image gallery.tsx right here. I'm going to be using the RAFCE. Go to our app and register there right in here, just like that. I'll go to my component, and the first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab the motion from where? From the Framer motion. We also have to define these images, which you can get from my GitHub repository, or if you want to provide your own, you are more than welcome to do that. So I'll just remove that from here, change that to the motion.div, and here we have to specify the class name of flex. Now we have to go into this div, and I'm going to be iterating over through all of that images. So I'll use like images.map method, and it's going to take the source and also the index, and inside there I'm going to use the motion.image, and here let's just close that. It's going to take the key. So for the key we're going to be passing our index inside there. For the source, let's just pass our source. For the alternative text, I'll use like provide my index totally dynamically. So I'll use like index, and here we also have to provide the variants, and for this variants we're going to be passing our stagger variants, which we are going to be defining in a few seconds. So stagger variants like so, and I'm gonna also provide a bit of classes to that. So I'll use like width will be set to 20 rem, and also height will be set to auto, margin for the left will be set to rem, and totally rounded, rounded like so. So if I save my file, I'm gonna define this variant at the top here. So I'll use like const stagger variants, and inside there we have to define our hidden, and when it is hidden, so you want to change the opacity to 0, and if that is set to visible, we want to change the opacity to 1. That's totally done. I'm gonna go into this div and provide my animation right here. So I'll use like for the initial prop or initial. Okay, so you want to use the hidden, but if that's not the case, so on the animate you want to use the animate, not animate but or visible. And also we are going to be defining our variants. I'll use like VARINTS, and we are going to be providing the visible state. And for the visible state, once again we are going to be using that same transition. So let's just provide this transition, and for this transition we have a special property called the stagger children, and I'm going to provide like maybe 1 second would be fine. So now let me just save there, test this out. So let's just refresh there, and here you can see we're now getting 1 2 3 all of that images. So let me just refresh there once again. First of all, it's going to give us that image, then that one, and then this one. I provided a lot of time, but you can change that to like 0.5 or 6 or something like that, and it will work totally fine. So now let me just refresh there, and I guess that's looking a bit cool. You can also change that to like 0.2. Now let me just refresh there. Yep, it is super quick. Yeah, this one is super quick. I can totally change that to, I guess 5 would be fine. Definitely 5 would be great. Yeah, that was the stagger image gallery. What do we have to do next? We have to define our stagger button press. Create a set of buttons that animate into the view with the stagger effect when we hover over it. So we have to create a set of buttons, then we can use the motion.div to animate each button, and then we can implement the stagger animation effect when hovering over the button container. That's going to be quite simple and easy. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my component folder. I did it again. God damn it. So we have to create a stagger button press.tsx file, and I'm going to be using the RAFCE inside there. Go to the app, comment this line out, and register my stagger animate. Come on, stagger press button there. Oh my god, stagger button press. There we go. I can't even speak no more. I speak a lot today because I was recording this course, so it took me way much time and energy to record this course. But yeah, let's just first of all create our buttons. So I'll use like array, and we are going to be using like button 1, button 2, and button 3. Also button 4 would be fine. Okay, so we're going to be going in there and change there to the motion.div, and inside there let's just iterate over through all of their buttons.map method. Here we have to specify the label and also the index inside there. Okay, so inside this one we are going to be using our motion.button and define our buttons right here. So it's going to take that label. I'm going to render that label right here, save our file, and it's going to give us that what do we call it, button 1, 2, 3, and fourth one. So I can also totally style them. I can provide first of all the key, and the key will be set to the index. I'm going to use the class name. Padding all around will be set to 2, background will be set to blue of 500, text totally white and rounded. Save our file. This is how it looks like right now. I'm going to also provide a bit of margins, so margin 2 rems would be fine. Yeah, they are looking cool. Now underneath there, let's just use when somebody hover over there, so I can use like while hover, so we can just increase the scaling of this. So I'll use like scale 101, I mean like 1.1, and now if I hover over there, so it's going to increase the scaling of these buttons, and they are looking cool. Next, I'm going to also use my stagger on this button, I mean like on this div. So I'll use like the class name, and the class will be set to flex, and space on the x-axis will be set to 4, like so. And when somebody hover over there, while hover, so we are going to be using the transition property, and we want to use our stagger children and set there to 0.2. Now if I hover my mouse over to there, so yeah, we are getting this kind of a smooth transition, but I wouldn't call it as a stagger animation. I don't know why I put that in this practice, but yeah, we have a little bit of practice about what do we call it, the while hover effect or the while hover prop as well. So you know what, I'm going to either crop this part out or I'll just remove that from the GitHub repository. Anyways, let's talk about the stagger. That was the button. So now let's talk about the stagger grid layout. So what do we have to do? We have to create a grid layout of item that animate into the view with the stagger effect. And you guys already know what a stagger effect is. So we have to create an array of items that can be displayed into a grid format, and then we can use the motion.div for each grid item. We can implement the stagger effect so that each grid item animate with a slightly delay relative to its position. So let's start working on that one. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define this stagger grid layout.tsx, and I'm going to be using my array-fce inside there. Go there, comment that line out, and register my component right here. So I'll use this layout, save my file, and let's just start working on there by importing first of all the motion from where, from the framer motion. Now I'll also define my items. So I'll use like item 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth until item 6. Now we also have to convert that to the motion.div, and I'm going to also provide a class name of grid. Grid will be set to columns 3, and gap I'm going to provide like 4 inside this div. Let's just iterate over through all of that item. So I'll use like the map method and specify the item and also the index inside there. Okay, so I'll use like the motion.div and close there. Duplicate this line of code and close it like so. I'm going to provide the key, and for the key which will be coming from the index, I'm going to also provide the class name. Padding will all around will be set to 4. Background gray will be set to 200. Come on, 200. And round it totally. So I'm going to save my file right now. Check this out. So yeah, this is our simple basic grid layout. So now let's just provide a bit of styling today. But first of all, I'm going to also render the items. So let's just check this out. We have all of that items. You want to change the color of that to text. Come on. Text totally black. The color is now changed to totally black. And you know what, let's just provide a bit of animation to that. So I'm going to go to the top and define my stagger right here. Not a stagger, but my variant. So I'll use like const stagger variance, and it's going to be equals to the hidden prop, and the opacity will be set to 0 initially. On the visible, the opacity will be set to 1, and we have to specify a comma in there. Copy the name of that, put that stagger variance right here. So I'll use like the variant, not the viewport but the variant, variants, and provide my stagger variants in there. Here for this div, I'm going to also provide my variants, and for this variant, what do we have to do? We have to provide our visible, and I'm going to say the transition, that stagger children and provide 0.2 as a delay to them. We're going to be also using the initial state, and for the initial state we want to use the hidden, and for the animate state we want to use the visible, visible. Now let me just save my file, test this out. So if I just refresh there, and it's going to give us this amazing amazing look right here, amazing grid. So yeah, and you know what, that is looking horrible, so I'm gonna have to remove that one and close that manually like so. Now let me just refresh there. Here you can see it's gonna give us this layout. I can also change the styling of that too. 1 second, and now let's just refresh there, and 1 2 3, slightly slow. Okay, so that was our stagger grid layout. The final thing that we have to do is that we have to define our stagger text review. Create a title where each letter animate into the view with a stagger effect. How are we going to be doing this? Split a string into an array of characters, then use the motion.span to display each character. Implement a stagger animation effect for the character to appear one after the other. So let's just start working on that. I'm gonna go ahead and define my component right here with the name of stagger text stagger text reveal.tsx. And let's just use our RAFC inside there. Go to the app, comment this line out, and define my component right here just like that. I'm gonna go into that component. Now let's start working on that. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the motion from where? From the framer motion. So we have to define our text. So I'll use like const text, and it's gonna be equals to my name, like Hussein Web Dev. Or you know, instead of writing my name, I'm gonna write like hello. I'm gonna save that, but providing a comma, I'm gonna provide a space. Next we have to remove that and change that to the motion.h1, and here I'm gonna provide the class name of text for Excel. Font will be set to bold, text will be set to totally white, and here we have to render our text. So I cannot render my text like that, but you know what, I'm gonna hit enter right here. The first thing that I can do is that I can use the text.split method, and then I can just provide an empty string, so it's gonna convert my string to array. So now let me just save there, and here you can see it's gonna give us that string, but basically this is array right now because we are now using the split method on there, so it's gonna convert there to array. So which means like I can also iterate over through there. So I'll use like the map method. I'm gonna get the character and also its index. Like for each character we're going to be also getting its index. So now I can use like motion.span, and I'm gonna close them, and here we also have to specify the key, and for the key we're going to be passing the index. And yeah, now let me just paste that character right here, the character name to be precise. We can totally see there right now, but now we have to animate there. So if you want to animate there, first of all we have to animate this h1, then we are going to be animating this div, like this span to be precise. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to specify my variants, come on, variants, and for these variants we're going to be using the visible and provide our transitions on there. So let's just choose this transition and provide our stagger children, and for this stagger children I'm going to provide like 0.1 seconds for the delay. I'm going to also use the initial. When initially it renders, we are going to be using the hidden prop, and on the animate we want to use the visible. And now if I just refresh there, nothing will still happen because we also have to split this out. We already split this out, but we have to animate there. So to animate there, I'm going to go to the top, and first of all we have to create our stagger variant. So I'll use like const stagger variants, and inside there we have to use the hidden prop, and the opacity will be set to 0. Put a comma in there, change that to visible, and change that to 1. I'm gonna copy the name of that, go to the bottom, and provide my variants right here, and paste the stagger variants. Check this out. So now let me just refresh that, and we are now getting each character one by one. Let's just refresh that once again. That's a cool effect. That's a cool 2007 effect. Yeah, I know, 2007 effect. So now let's just change that to like maybe 1 second, save our file, and now if I just refresh there, 1 2 3 4, and it will take forever. But yeah, that was our amazing stagger animation practice, and I hope you loved it. Welcome to the use motion value hook practice. So in this one we're going to be building amazing animation. So first of all we're going to be creating a draggable box, then hover link scale. After that we are going to be building a string animated position and dynamic rotation. So let's start from the first one, which is a draggable box. So create a draggable box that updates its position using the use motion value. So here are the instructions. Create a motion.div that can be dragged around. So use the use motion value to track the X value and also the Y position of the box. Finally, we have to display the current position of the box as a text. So let's just start working on that. I'm gonna go ahead and create my components folder, and inside there we have to create a draggable box.tsx, and I'm gonna just write my RAFCE inside there, go to my app and register this component right in here like so. I'm gonna save this file. I'll use npm run dev, run there. So this is how it looks like. So I'll also provide a classes. I'm gonna say like the height will be set to screen, flex, and justify will be set to center. Items will also be set to center. Background will be this color, so which is a 0D1017, and let's just close this, save our file. And this is how it looks like. Also change the text to totally white. Now let's start working on our draggable box. So the first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to grab the motion from where? From the framer motion. Next, I'm going to define my motion value. So I'll use like const x, and it's going to be equals to the use motion value hook, not a template by use motion value, and the initial value will be set to 0. I'm going to also duplicate that and change the variable name to y. So now we are creating two motion values, and now we have to use them inside our UI. So I'll provide a class name, and it's going to be set to flex, and flex will be set to column, and items will also be set to center. So inside this div, now I'm going to be defining my motion.div. So I'll use like motion.div and close that like so. Now the first thing that I want to do is that I want to style that a bit. So I'll provide the width of 32. The height will also be set to 32. Background will be set to totally blue 500. Totally rounded. So now let me just save my file, and this is how it looks like. I'm gonna also provide my drag, and then I'll provide the drag. Then I'm gonna provide the style, and for this style I'm gonna specify the X value and also the Y value, which is now coming from these motion values. So now underneath this div, I'm gonna create a paragraph, and now this paragraph will have the text of totally white, white like so. Now I'm gonna render my position. So I'll use like position, come on, position, and here we have to render our position. So I'll use like x.get, and it's going to give us the x value. I'm going to also provide a comma here, and I'm going to say like y.get, and it's going to give us, you know what, outside from this one, I'm going to say like y.get, and it's going to give us the y position. So now let me just save my file, and now here is the catch. If I move there, nothing will show up right here inside this position area, but if I leave there and make some changes, like for instance if I just remove this class name from here, save my file, now we are getting that value. Look at these values, they are super long. So I'm going to change that to toFix. So I'll use like .toFixed and fix that with two numbers. I'm going to also provide the toFix right here and fix that with two numbers, save our file, and now we are getting the actual value. So yeah, if I move there, nothing will show up. Like, yeah, nothing is showing up right here. But now if I go ahead and just make some sort of a changes, like I'm going to specify the class name of I don't know, something like that, and now let me just save my file. Now I can totally see the changes. So yeah, that was our first draggable box. Next we have to create the hover link scale. So create a button that scales up when hovered using the use motion value in this case. Okay, so just create a motion dot button, and then you can use the use motion value for the motion value to control the scale of the button, and also update the scale value on hover and reset there when we are not hovering. So you know what, if you want to give it your best shot, you totally can. But now let me just create this component with the name of hover link scale.tsx, and I'm going to use my RAFCE inside there. Go to my app, comment this line out, and register this component right here. I'm going to go to this component, and now let's start working on this. So the first thing that I will need is the motion, and we will also need the use motion. Come on, the use motion value from where? From the framer motion. Now we can totally do that. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to define my scale motion value. So I'll just give it the name of like scale, and it's going to be equals to the use motion value. And the initial value, I'm going to specify 0 to that, because if I specify 0 value, we would not be able to see anything. So I want to specify the motion value of 1 to there, so that we would be able to see something. And now I'm going to also change that to motion.div, and inside this div, you know, I'm going to say like hover me or something like that. And now let me just style that a bit. So I'll use like class name, padding all around will be set to 4, background totally blue of 500, text totally white and rounded. Now let me save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our boring button. But now I'm going to make a few changes to that. On hover start, we are going to be firing this function, which is the arrow function, and we are going to be getting the scale.get value, and then we have to specify like 0.2 in there. Okay, so now let me just save my file, not get but set, god damn it. This is how we are going to be setting this. So now I'm going to also provide the on hover end, And here we also have to specify the arrow function, and on this arrow function we are going to be using the scale and then setting a new value to there. So I'll just provide like 1 to there, and I'm going to also render my scale inside this style. So I'll use like scale right here, save our file. And now if I hover over there, so it's going to bump it up, and now if I leave the mouse, so it's going to throw it back. Here you can see this is not looking that much cool, but yeah, we are achieving this animation by using the motion value from Framer Motion. Next, we have to create a spring animated position. So create a box that spring to a new position when we click on it. And to achieve that, we are going to be using the use motion value hook. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to create a motion.div that can be clicked to move to a new position. We can use the use motion value for controlling the X and also the Y position and animate the box to a new position with the spring effect. So you know what, let's just start working on that. I'm going to create this new file with the name of spring animated position.tsx, and I'll use my RAFC inside there. Go to the app, comment this line out and register there right in here like so. Now let me go in there, and the first thing that we would need is the motion, and obviously we would need the use motion value hook. From where? From the Framer Motion. Now inside there we are going to be defining the X value, and X going to be equals to the use motion value, and the initial value will be set to 0. I'm going to also specify there for the Y axis as well. And now we have to change this div to the motion dot, or you know what, we are not going to be changing this div, but we are going to be defining yet another div inside there. So I'll use like motion.div and close there. I'm going to also specify the class name of width will be set to 32, height will also be set to 32, and background totally blue 500, totally rounded. And I'm going to say like click me, save my file, and we are now getting this amazing box once again. Now let me render the X and Y values by using the style. So I'll provide the X value will be set to this X motion value, and also we are going to be setting the Y axis value to this motion value as well. And now let me attach the on click event handler. So when somebody clicks on there, we are going to be moving the box. So how are we going to be doing there? This is how we are going to be doing there. So I'll just create a new function with the name of move box, and inside this function we are going to be getting the X value. Then we can use the set method, and now we need a random position. So I'll use like mat.random, and then I'm going to just multiply there by, I don't know, maybe 300. I guess 300 would be fine. I'm going to also duplicate there and change that to the Y axis as well. And this is how we are going to be getting a random number. We are going to be getting a random position once we click on that box. If I click on there, it's going to move it to the bottom. If I click on there, so it's going to move it right here anytime I clicked on it. So yeah, this is also something that we achieve by using the use motion value. That's also looking cool. So now let's start working on the next one. What do we have to do next? We have to create a dynamic rotation. So create a component that rotates based on a motion value. Create a motion.div that rotates when the button is clicked, and use the use motion value to track the rotation angle. Animate the rotation of the box based on a motion value. Now let's start working on that. I'm gonna go in there and define my dynamic rotation.tsx file. Now I'll use my RAFC inside there. Go to the app, comment this line out, and render that right in here just like that. I'm gonna go into this component, and the first thing that I would do is that I would need the motion and also the use motion value. From where? From the Framer Motion. Next we have to define our rotation. So I'll use the const rotation is going to be equals to this use motion value, and the initial value I'm going to set there to 0. Now let me just remove that and change that to the motion.div, and here I'm going to provide the classes. So I'll use like width will be set to 32, and that's same exactly the same classes. So I'll use like background of blue 500, totally rounded. And now it's going to say like click me once again, save our file. I'm going to render the rotation. So I'll use like style, and we have to set that to rotate, and rotate will be set to this rotation, which is coming from this. You know what, I'm going to copy the name of this rotation. I mean like rotate, and we no longer have to specify this rotation. Now let me save my file, and I'm going to also attach the on click event handler. So I'll use like on click, and we have to specify the rotate box function inside there. And let's just create this function. So I'll use like const rotate box and then we have to call this function. We have to use the rotate. We have to use the set method on there. Here we're going to be using the rotate once again, and then the dot get value. So it's going to give us that new value, and then we have to add like 45 to there. 45 like so. So now let me save my file, and now if I click on there, here you can see it's going to start rotating. What the hell was there? But yeah, we are now getting them by using the use motion value. And it is not looking that impressive, to be honest, but yeah, we are achieving something. Like, this is just a practice of use motion value. We are now working with the motion values. We are not making some amazing animation, which we will in this course. But yeah, that was amazing practice about the use motion value. Now very quickly we have to change all of that use motion value to use the use spring animation. So I'm gonna copy the name of that and change that right here, save my file and test this out. So now if I just refresh there, still we are not getting this amazing animation. Okay, that's super bouncy, super duper bouncy. But now if I change something inside there, like, you know what, I'm gonna change this text white, and here you can see we are still getting that same result, but now we are getting that spring animation. I'm gonna go there, comment this line out, uncomment there, save this file, go in there once again and change there to the use spring. Okay, use spring, save our file. Now if I just hover over there, it's gonna give us that springy animation. Cool. I'm gonna also comment that one out and uncomment this one, go in there and change both of them to the use spring animation, save my file. And now if I click on there, here you can see it's gonna move there right here, but that is smooth animation. So if I click on there, that is looking super cool. I'm gonna go to my app and comment that one out, uncomment the dynamic rotation, go there and change the and change that to the use spring. Okay, so our file once again. If I click on there, it's gonna rotate there, but it's gonna also apply the spring animation to there. So that's also looking cool, and that was the use spring animation challenge, or practice to be precise. Welcome to the while in view prop challenge, or exercises, or practice, whatever you want to call there. So in this one we are going to be building amazing stuff. So the first thing that we are going to be doing is that we are going to be defining the stagger fade in and slide in. Then we are going to be creating a card flip animation. After that, complex timeline animation, and finally interactive hover and in view animation. So let's just start from the first one, which is a stagger fade and slide animation. So what do we have to do? We have to create a list of items that fades and slide in staggered when they move into the view. What do we have to do? We have to create an array of items to display there. Then we have to use the motion.ul for the list and motion.li for each item. Finally, we have to implement the staggered animation by using the variants and the transition prop. So now let's just start working on that. I'm gonna go ahead and define my component folder, and inside there we are going to be defining our staggered list.tsx file. And now let's just use our RAFCE inside there, go to our app and register this component right in here, just like that. And we are now getting the staggered animation. And now I'm gonna also provide a bit of classes to this one. So I'll use like class name, and height will be set to 150 rem. And then I'm gonna provide the flex, and justify will be set to center, and items will also be set to center. Background will be set to 0D1017 and close there. I'm gonna save my file, test this out. So we are not even able to see something because we are now providing a lot of height today, and now you'll be able to see that staggered list. I'm gonna also change the color of that to totally white, and now that's looking better. Let's go to the stagger animation. So the first thing that we have to do is that obviously we have to import the motion from where, from the framer motion. Now inside there we have to define the items. So I'll use like items, and it's gonna be equals to like item 1, and then I'm gonna provide like item 2, item 3, and then we have to specify the item 4. Finally we have to provide our item 5 inside there. Here we have to remove that and change that to the motion.ul, and inside this motion.ul, first of all I'm gonna provide the class names. It's gonna be set to flex, and flex will be set to column, and items will be set to center. Come on, item center. And now inside this ul we have to iterate over through all of our items. So I'll use like items.map. We need the item, we also need the index inside there, and inside this one we are going to be using the motion.li, not just the motion but .li, and close there. And here we have to just render our items inside there. I'm gonna save this file. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to create our variants. So I'm gonna go ahead and define my list variants, and it's gonna be equals to this object. We have to specify the hidden prop, and it's going to be set to opacity of 0. And now I'm going to just duplicate this line of code and change that to visible, and change the opacity of that to 1. Now we have to use this list variant inside this ul. So I'm going to hit enter right here and provide my variants. And for these variants we are going to be using the list variant. I'm going to also provide the initial state, and for the initial state it's going to be set to hidden. And then we have to provide the while, the while in view. When it is in view, then we want to set there to visible, like so. That's totally done. I'm going to also provide the transition to there. So for this transition we have to use the stagger children and set the transition to 0.3. I'm gonna also animate each of these allies. So I'll use like, first of all, we have to provide the key, and key will be set to the index. We also have to provide a bit of classes to there, like background will be set to totally blue of 500. Padding all around will be set to 4. Text will be set to totally white. Margin for the y-axis will be set to 2. Totally rounded large. I'm gonna save this file and provide my initial state. And for this initial state, what do we have to do? We have to provide the opacity, and opacity will be set to 0. And on the y-axis, we want to set that to 20. While our item is in view, so I'll use like while in view. And in this situation, we're going to be providing the opacity, and opacity will be set to 1, and the y-axis will be set to 0. I'm going to also provide a transition. Come on, transition. And for this transition, we're going to be setting that to a duration of 0.5 seconds. Now let me just save my file. So we would not able to see that. Now let me just refresh there. And if I scroll down, watch what happens. And bang, 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 bang. You're now getting that animation. That is looking super cool. And watch what happened. Like initially that's going to be set to hidden, but now as soon as I scroll there, each of the items are now coming up very smoothly, and we're now providing this amazing transition to there. So yeah, you can totally change the colors of there. You can totally change whatever you want to change inside there. But in my case, the stagger fade in is done. Next, we have to create a flipping animation or card flip animation. So here are the steps. Create a card component with the front and also the back side. And then we have to use the use motion, use while in view drop to animate the rotation along with the y-axis. And you can either use the Tailwind CSS or just use a pure CSS for that. Time to define our flipping card. So let's just use our card.flip, cardflip.tsx, and define my RAFCE inside there. Go to the app, comment this line out, and here we have to render our component like so. Okay, so I'm gonna go in there. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to start from by importing the motion. So I'll use like import motion from where? From the framer motion. I'm gonna save this file, and now I'm gonna remove that from here and provide my class name. So I'll use like perspective 1000, and width will be set to 64, and height will also be set to 64. Inside there, we have to define our motion.dev and close there. And inside this motion dev, we have to define our class with the name of absolute. Come on, absolute, and also width will be set to totally full. Height will also be set to totally full, and we have to provide the background of totally blue 500. Text will be set to totally white, and we have to provide the flex, and items will be set to center. Justify will be center, and totally rounded. So I'll use like rounded and save my file. Okay, so here I'm gonna say like front side. Now I'm gonna duplicate there and change that to the back side. Okay, so I'll use like back like so, but I'm gonna also specify the animate. So I'll use like on animate. Come on, we have to also change this one to the motion.dev. So I'll use like motion.dev, and here we have to specify the animate prop, and on the animate prop we're going to be using the y-axis, and we have to change that to 180 degree. Now we have to specify our motion values. So what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna hide this one, and what the hell am I doing? Comment that, hide that. Now I'm gonna provide a bit of classes to this div. So it's gonna be set to relative, width will be set to full, and height will also be set to full or screen, whatever you want to call that. Now if I save my file, here you can see we are now getting these divs, but they are not looking that cool. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to specify the initial and all of their states. So I'll use like initial, and for the initial state you want to rotate the y-axis. So I'll use like rotate on the y-axis and set that to 0. While this is in view, then you want to change the rotation of the y-axis to 180 degree. Then we have to also specify the transition, and for this transition we have to provide the duration of 0.6 seconds. I'm going to also use the style and provide the perspective to there. So I'll use like transform style. Come on, transform style. I'm going to choose there and set there to preserve 3D. And I just realized that I cannot do the animation right here. So instead I'm going to have to use the style and provide my transform property and change that to the rotate on the y-axis and change that to 180 degree like so. Let me just close this, save my file. Now if I refresh them and go to the bottom and watch what happens. So we are now getting this flipping animation. Go to the top, we are now getting that back. First of all, we are going to be getting the front, then we are going to be getting that back. If I scroll to the top, still we are now getting that flipping card animation. And I guess you've seen that in a lot of websites, but I cannot just give you a quick example of that because I'm gonna have to do a lot of research for that, but you get the idea. Now we are getting this amazing animation or amazing card flipper. Okay, so next we have to define our timeline animation. So what do we have to do? We have to create a complex timeline animation, create a sequence of animation that occurs when the section comes into the view, including the rotation, scaling, and also the fading. So what do we have to do? We have to set up a multiple element that will animate in a sequence. Then we can use the variant for the complex animation, like we define the rotation, scaling, and also the fading. And we can control the animation by using these transition properties. So let's just start working on that. I'm going to go ahead and define my component with the name of timeline animation.tsx, and I'm going to be using the RAFCE inside there.